You might find yourself trapped in a cycle of frustration and disappointment in your relationship. Instead of feeling uplifted by your partner, you feel compelled to change them, turning love into a project. This constant push can create tension, leaving both of you feeling misunderstood and distant. You may even start to question the foundation of your connection, wondering if the love you once cherished has morphed into something unrecognizable. As you navigate these complex feelings, it's essential to recognize that this dynamic could be a sign from God, urging you to embrace acceptance and rediscover the true essence of your relationship. When a relationship begins pulling you away from your faith, it's often a sign of deeper issues that can affect your soul. Faith isn't just a personal belief, it's a foundation meant to ground you, giving purpose and direction to your life. In Deuteronomy 6, verse 5, God calls his people to love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, underscoring the central place faith should hold in a believer's life. A relationship that undermines this commitment often leads to a subtle but significant drift, a gradual reorienting of your values and priorities away from God. Instead of bringing out your love for God and deepening your connection to Him, such a relationship can create a distance, pulling you away from spiritual growth. Relationships shape our lives profoundly, and the people we become deeply connected to influence our thoughts, emotions, and even our worldview. The Bible reminds us of the importance of healthy connections in Proverbs 13:20, where it says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." The choices you make in relationships should bring out the best in your faith journey. When a relationship lacks this foundation, it often results in a quiet reshaping of your habits, shifting the time and energy you once devoted to God. Over time, this shift can make spiritual practices feel less essential, crowding out prayer, Bible study, and worship. In his writings, C.S. Lewis pointed out the danger of letting any relationship eclipse one's relationship with God. He understood that human love, while powerful, was never meant to replace divine love. When we love others without God at the center, we risk elevating them to a position they were never meant to hold. The Bible warns about this too in Exodus 20, verse 3, where God says, "You shall have no other gods before me." Placing someone in the role of spiritual fulfillment creates an imbalance in the relationship, subtly allowing it to erode the foundation of your faith. If you find yourself adjusting your beliefs or downplaying your commitment to God to keep the peace, it's worth considering whether this relationship is fostering true respect. Romans 12, verse 2 warns against conforming to the pattern of this world, a reminder that the influence of those closest to us can be powerful, even to the point of compromising our values. Genuine, healthy love respects boundaries, allowing space for spiritual individuality and encouraging mutual growth. When you feel pressured to fit into someone else's spiritual mold, it's a signal that your faith and identity may be at risk. For those who think they can help a partner change, it's often a heavy emotional and spiritual burden. A relationship focused on saving someone spiritually can become draining, ultimately leaving one partner spiritually depleted. Lewis believed that while love is patient and hopeful, it doesn't require us to compromise our beliefs or calling. Faith is intended to be a source of renewal and strength, and a relationship that brings you closer to God is a gift meant to inspire your walk with Him. However, when a relationship leads to spiritual neglect or struggle, it's important to reevaluate whether it aligns with the life God has called you to. When a relationship fills you with constant fear or anxiety, it may be a signal that something fundamental is off. Fear and love are opposing forces, and a relationship grounded in true love encourages a sense of peace rather than dread. In 1 John 4:18, the Bible tells us, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment." A relationship that leaves you anxious, fearful of conflict, or constantly doubting your worth doesn't reflect God's design for love. Instead, it creates a kind of bondage where worry and insecurity replace joy and trust, leading to emotional strain that can erode your well-being over time. The persistent anxiety you feel may come from walking on eggshells around your partner, afraid of their reactions or judgments. This emotional instability, where you're always alert to avoid upsetting them, hints at a power dynamic that's out of balance. True love, as described in 1 Corinthians 13, is patient, kind, and free from pride or self-seeking. Relationships founded on love should lift you up rather than leave you feeling that you're never enough. When anxiety becomes your primary emotion, it may be a signal that the relationship is grounded more in control or conditional acceptance than in the freedom of genuine love. C.S. Lewis once described love as a force that expands the soul, freeing us to grow closer to God and others without restraint. If a relationship has the opposite effect, causing you to shrink back or live in a state of fear, it could be a warning. While every relationship has its challenges, a love that constantly triggers your anxiety rather than providing comfort undermines the peace God intends for you. Fear in relationships often arises when someone uses power, manipulation, or guilt to control the other person, undermining the mutual respect that forms a healthy foundation. The Bible calls for us to serve one another humbly in love, Galatians 5:13, and a relationship filled with anxiety often lacks this humility, leaning instead towards selfishness and emotional pressure. Sometimes, fear in a relationship can be masked by a desire to keep the peace, leading you to ignore or downplay the negative aspects. But suppressing these feelings or pretending they aren't real doesn't make them go away. It can actually deepen your anxiety. Proverbs 12:25 says, "Anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up." In a loving relationship, words and actions should bring encouragement rather than cast a shadow of fear. If you constantly feel weighed down, unsure of where you stand, it could mean the relationship is nurturing anxiety rather than comfort, leaving you more troubled than whole. Trust is essential for peace, and a relationship that fosters fear often lacks genuine trust. If you find yourself questioning your partner's honesty, intentions, or commitment, it may be a sign that fear has crept into the relationship, disrupting the foundation of faith and security that should sustain it. Lewis believed that love should allow people to be their truest selves, encouraging an environment where both partners feel free to grow and thrive. But fear stifles growth, keeping you from being yourself, robbing you of the courage to share your heart, and silencing your voice. A relationship marked by ongoing anxiety or fear is often missing the peace that Christ offers. Philippians 4:7 speaks of the peace of God which transcends all understanding, a peace that should form the backdrop of every relationship blessed by God. When you're deprived of that peace, constantly unsettled, it may be a divine warning that this relationship is not reflecting God's intention for love. True love brings a sense of safety and freedom, inviting you to rest in the assurance that you are valued. When you find yourself compromising on core values to sustain a relationship, it's often a sign that you're straying from the path God intended for you. Core values aren't just personal preferences. They're the fundamental beliefs and standards that define who you are and guide your life. In Matthew 5:37, Jesus teaches, "Let your yes be yes, and your no, no," urging us to live with clarity and conviction. When a relationship begins eroding that clarity, tempting you to sacrifice what you know to be right, it could be a warning that this partnership is compromising your faith and integrity. Relationships have a powerful influence on our choices and direction, shaping the way we see ourselves and the world. Compromising on deeply held beliefs for the sake of another person may initially seem like a small concession, but it can create a slow drift from who you are meant to be. C.S. Lewis noted that integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, emphasizing that the true test of character isn't found in easy decisions, but in remaining steadfast when tempted. Relationships that encourage you to bend or abandon these principles can weaken the foundations of your faith, leaving you questioning not only your values but your identity in God. Values rooted in faith serve as a moral compass, helping you distinguish right from wrong, truth from deception. Proverbs 4:23 instructs us to guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it, a reminder that core values are essential for spiritual health. When you begin to compromise on these values to avoid conflict, seek approval, or simply fit in with a partner, You risk damaging your relationship with God and undermining the trust He has placed in you to uphold His teachings. Compromising on what you know is right not only disrupts your personal integrity, but can create lasting spiritual consequences. A partner who respects your values, even if they don't share all of them, supports an environment where both people can grow. But if you find that your partner belittles, dismisses, or pressures you to abandon these values, it's a warning that the relationship may not be grounded in mutual respect. Romans 12 verse 2 calls believers not to conform to the patterns of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Relationships that pressure you to adopt worldly perspectives over godly ones threaten this transformation, leading you away from rather than toward the life God has called you to. Relationships centered on respect allow space for each person's beliefs, creating room for faith to flourish rather than falter. C.S. Lewis believed that love elevates our character and strengthens our convictions, urging that love is not a force that should force us to compromise our integrity. But when love demands that we silence our convictions, it's no longer love in its truest form. It becomes a burden, a weight that strains the heart and clouds the spirit. Compromising core values in a relationship often leads to resentment, self-doubt, and spiritual turmoil. 2 Corinthians 6:14 reminds believers not to be unequally yoked with unbelievers, a principle that goes beyond belief differences and speaks to compatibility in values and purpose. When two people are aligned in their convictions, they create a strong foundation, one that doesn't ask either to diminish their integrity. Relationships that compel you to lower or dismiss these standards rob you of the peace that God intends for your life, leaving you adrift and distanced from the self He designed you to be. Relationships that respect values foster growth and strength, encouraging both partners to walk in their purpose without hesitation. But when you feel the need to set aside or silence your convictions, it's often a sign that the relationship is shifting you away from God's truth. Core values are sacred, meant to anchor you in faith and shield you from losing yourself. And any relationship that weakens them may be a reminder that God is calling you back to Him. When a relationship turns into idolization, when your partner occupies the center of your life above all else, it often signals a dangerous shift in priorities. Loving someone deeply is natural, but when that love begins to eclipse everything, even your devotion to God, it disrupts the balance that faith calls for. In Exodus 20 verse 3, God commands, "You shall have no other gods before me." When your partner takes this place in your heart, becoming the source of your happiness, security, and purpose, you may be inching toward idolization, a position only God is meant to hold. Idolizing a partner can subtly transform love into dependency. Rather than seeing them as a complement to your life, you might start seeing them as the entire foundation, feeling lost or incomplete without their presence. C.S. Lewis warned against the dangers of disordered loves, explaining that when we place anything above God, we risk making it into an idol, ultimately setting ourselves up for heartbreak. His insight reminds us that, while love is powerful, human relationships are never meant to fulfill our every need. When they do, we risk placing unrealistic expectations on our partner, leading to disillusionment and deep spiritual strain. The Bible encourages a balanced love rooted in respect, unity, and mutual growth, where each partner serves to strengthen the other's faith rather than overshadow it. In Matthew 6:33, Jesus teaches, "Seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." When a partner becomes the primary pursuit instead of God, this order is reversed, often resulting in spiritual confusion and emptiness. Placing all your hope, joy, and purpose in one person instead of in God creates a fragile dependency, one that falters under the weight of life's challenges. Idolatry also tends to isolate us, pulling us away from friends, family, and community, as the relationship consumes all time and attention. This isolation, in turn, limits spiritual growth, as you may start neglecting practices that keep you connected to God. Healthy relationships bring people closer to God, but idolatrous ones can pull us away, creating a separation that disrupts faith. Colossians 3:2 encourages us to set your minds on things above, not on earthly things, a reminder that only a relationship with God has the depth to fulfill the longings of the soul. When this perspective shifts, the relationship loses its healthy grounding, transforming into a cycle of expectation and disappointment. C.S. Lewis described this dynamic, observing that we often misplace the longing for divine love onto people, expecting them to satisfy spiritual needs only God can fulfill. This misplacement can strain a relationship, as we unconsciously require a level of fulfillment that no human being can provide. The partner, no matter how loving, cannot become a god, nor should they. When the demands on them to provide unending support, happiness, or identity grow too high, the relationship becomes a burden rather than a blessing, leaving both individuals spiritually depleted. Idolization often leads to a loss of self and a blurring of personal boundaries, as you may start sacrificing your values or individuality to maintain the relationship. In Galatians 5:1, Paul reminds believers, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." True love respects and even cherishes this freedom, allowing each person to grow as God intended, rooted in faith and individuality. Idolization, however, often leads to a binding attachment, one that diminishes personal identity and makes it difficult to hear God's voice. When a partner begins to overshadow your faith and relationship with God, it's a warning that the relationship is shifting into idolatry. The Bible's call to keep God first in all things is meant to safeguard your heart, ensuring that your primary source of love, identity, and purpose is unshakable. Any relationship that becomes the center of your life rather than God distorts this truth, drawing you further from Him. In returning God to the center, you free yourself to experience a love that is balanced, rooted, and true, where both partners can grow without sacrificing their faith. When love begins to feel like control, it's a sign that something is off. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, trust, and freedom, but a relationship marked by control or manipulation distorts these foundations. Galatians 5:1 reminds us, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free." Any relationship that makes you feel trapped, that narrows your choices, or that requires constant concessions is working against that freedom, steering you away from the liberty God desires for you. Control in relationships often starts subtly, disguised as care or concern. It can look like someone making decisions for you, for your own good, or imposing expectations on your behavior, appearance, or even beliefs. These seemingly small demands can quickly expand, leaving you questioning your ability to make choices without their approval. C.S. Lewis spoke to the nature of true love when he emphasized that love, in its pure form, does not seek to control but to uplift. When someone begins to manipulate you, however subtle, it's a warning sign that the relationship is out of alignment with this love. The Bible offers many examples of freedom in love and warns against relationships that seek to dominate. Colossians 3:14 says, "And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." Real love doesn't stifle or restrict, it unites. But when a relationship involves manipulation or emotional coercion, it replaces this unity with a distorted version of love, one that enforces dependency and fear over genuine connection. Manipulation can make you feel that you need to change or conform constantly, eroding your confidence and clouding your judgment, keeping you bound to a partner's needs rather than supported in your personal growth. Control often takes the form of emotional manipulation, using guilt, fear, or insecurity as tools to influence your choices. C.S. Lewis warned against the human tendency to want to be needed, a desire that, when unchecked, can lead to possessiveness and domination in relationships. When your partner's love comes with strings attached, making you feel that love is contingent upon compliance, it can draw you away from a healthy sense of self and your identity in God. Over time, this manipulation creates a kind of dependency where your sense of worth becomes tied to their approval, making it difficult to break free. God's design for relationships is rooted in support, freedom, and selfless love. Philippians 2:3 calls us to do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. This spirit of humility and mutual respect opposes the dynamics of control. In a relationship where control or manipulation is present, one person often exerts power to ensure that their own needs, desires, and beliefs dominate, leaving the other feeling pressured, drained, and spiritually distant from God's purpose. Relationships marked by control ultimately undermine your relationship with God, as they lead you to question your worth, purpose, and autonomy. God's love fosters confidence, growth, and freedom, not insecurity or dependency. When a partner uses manipulation to hold you close, it warps the essence of love and keeps you from experiencing the fullness of life that God intends. If you feel compelled to silence your own voice, abandon your principles, or second-guess your worth, it's often a sign that God is urging you to reconsider. True love allows for growth, freedom, and unity, enabling both partners to walk in their faith without fear or coercion. When a relationship is constantly mired in chaos and instability, it's often a sign that something is fundamentally wrong. Love is meant to provide a sense of peace, connection, and mutual growth, but a relationship full of turmoil does the opposite. 1 Corinthians 14:33 reminds us, "For God is not a God of disorder, but of peace." If every interaction seems like a cycle of arguments, jealousy, or misunderstandings, the relationship may be steering you away from God's intentions for healthy, life-giving love. Chaos in relationships often manifests as constant emotional highs and lows, making it hard to find a steady foundation. The thrill of intense emotions can be mistaken for passion, but more often it reveals underlying insecurity and unmet needs. C.S. Lewis spoke about the dangers of misplaced passion and attachment, noting that true love is not the wild obsession people often romanticize. When a relationship continually swings between intense closeness and painful conflict, it suggests an attachment built more on emotional addiction than on mutual respect and understanding. Relationships grounded in chaos tend to distract us from our purpose and relationship with God. James 3:16 warns, "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." In a relationship defined by instability, there's often a focus on control, jealousy, or unmet expectations, all of which feed confusion rather than peace. The constant effort required to manage these emotions drains your energy and focus, making it harder to nurture your spiritual growth. Chaos becomes the norm, creating an environment where you're walking on eggshells, constantly adjusting yourself to avoid conflict. This isn't the security or stability God intends for a relationship rooted in love. Emotional turmoil can also cloud your ability to hear God's voice. When you're always managing conflict or trying to fix the relationship, your energy becomes so absorbed in damage control that it's difficult to focus on what God is saying to you. C.S. Lewis warned against relationships that lead us into cycles of dependency and turmoil, recognizing that such entanglements keep us from experiencing the peace and clarity God provides. Healthy love builds up, creates stability, and allows each person to grow closer to God, while chaotic love distracts, confuses, and eventually consumes. A relationship defined by chaos also disrupts your sense of self and purpose. Proverbs 4:23 urges, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." In a chaotic relationship, the constant emotional upheaval and insecurity can begin to erode your confidence, identity, and self-worth. Rather than focusing on growing together in faith and love, you may find yourself questioning your own value or constantly trying to prove your worth to your partner. This roller coaster of emotional highs and lows leaves little room for personal growth or genuine connection with God. God's design for relationships is rooted in stability and support, meant to help each partner feel secure, loved, and free to grow in faith. When chaos takes over, love turns into survival, overshadowing the joy, trust, and peace God intends for you. If a relationship continually drags you into cycles of conflict, jealousy, and emotional upheaval, it may be time to seek God's guidance. True love doesn't depend on chaotic passion or emotional turmoil. It brings you closer to God, enriches your life, and fosters stability and peace, echoing His perfect love for you. When a relationship requires secrecy, it's often a sign that something is not as it should be. If you find yourself hiding details about the relationship or downplaying its issues to friends and family, it may be because part of you senses that the relationship isn't healthy. Relationships should be something we can share openly with those who care about us, who can provide support and guidance. Jesus teaches in John 3:21, "But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light." When the relationship demands that you live in the shadows, it likely reflects that something isn't aligned with truth. Secrets are often maintained because of fear of judgment, criticism, or, most tellingly, fear of facing hard truths about the relationship itself. When you feel the need to keep your loved ones in the dark, it can signify that the relationship is pulling you away from who you truly are. C.S. Lewis emphasized that love, when it is good, brings a sense of clarity and strength. A relationship that drives you to be secretive or evasive about its problems is not giving you the courage and strength that true love should foster. Instead, it promotes isolation, cutting you off from the wisdom and support that friends and family can offer. Secrecy also prevents you from receiving the counsel that God provides through trusted relationships. Proverbs 11 verse 14 tells us, "Where there is no guidance, a people falls, but in an abundance of counselors there is safety." When you hide aspects of your relationship, especially its struggles, you are distancing yourself from the very people who might help you see the situation clearly. Loved ones often provide an external perspective, seeing signs that you might overlook because of your attachment. Isolating yourself from them only amplifies confusion, as you become increasingly dependent on your own perspective, which can be clouded by emotion or fear. Keeping relationship issues hidden also fosters denial, a dangerous place to reside spiritually and emotionally. C.S. Lewis observed that love distorted by possessiveness or dependency becomes a shadow of itself, no longer serving the individuals involved, but trapping them in patterns of need or fear. When you feel compelled to shield your relationship from those who care about you, it's often because the relationship is based on such distorted forms of love, creating a fear that loved ones might uncover its unhealthy aspects. Secrecy in relationships can also keep you from acknowledging the need for change. When your family or friends don't know the full picture, you lose accountability, which is essential for growth. Being open with loved ones can often prompt the support or counsel needed to address underlying issues, offering a path forward that secrecy only obscures. James 5:16 reminds us, "Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other, so that you may be healed." Hiding the truth distances you from healing and maintains the cycle of secrecy, leaving you vulnerable to further emotional or spiritual harm. A healthy relationship should be one you feel safe sharing with your community, receiving their blessings and support. When secrecy becomes a habit, it draws you further into isolation and away from God's light. Relationships rooted in love and respect foster openness and honesty, helping each person grow closer to God and to others. If your relationship requires you to hide or downplay its struggles, it may be a sign that God is warning you to reconsider. True love aligns with truth and transparency, helping you walk openly in the light with those who care for you, providing support, wisdom, and guidance. When the goal in a relationship shifts from mutual love and understanding to fixing or changing each other, the foundation of true connection weakens. Relationships are meant to uplift, not to mold each person into someone else's ideal. Love should offer a space to grow together, where both people find strength in their shared acceptance and commitment. Romans 15 verse 7 tells us, "Accept one another then, just as Christ accepted you, in order to bring praise to God." Constantly focusing on what the other person should change can cloud the core of a relationship, breeding frustration, resentment, and control, instead of the love and acceptance God intends. When each partner becomes focused on improving the other, it reflects a desire to control rather than to nurture. This drive to change someone else often stems from insecurity or fear. Fear that the person they are isn't enough, or insecurity about what it means if the partner doesn't conform to certain expectations. C.S. Lewis spoke about this need to control in love, warning that genuine love does not try to absorb or alter the beloved, but accepts them as they are. Real love provides an environment where each person is free to grow at their own pace, drawing strength from God and from each other, without pressure to meet an impossible standard. In relationships where the focus shifts toward changing each other, both partners tend to lose sight of the importance of acceptance. Trying to modify another person creates a dynamic that places one's personal expectations above the relationship, essentially making oneself the measure of the other's worth. This contradicts the humility and acceptance that love, in its truest form, requires. Philippians 2:3 reminds us, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility value others above yourselves." When love becomes a competition of who needs to change and how, the relationship becomes self-focused, driven by self-interest rather than genuine care. Focusing on change rather than acceptance also creates an atmosphere of judgment rather than trust. A healthy relationship is a place where both partners feel safe to be themselves, imperfections included. Constantly pointing out each other's flaws or habits can erode trust and self-esteem, and instead of drawing closer, each person retreats, growing more defensive or detached. C.S. Lewis recognized that love, when it becomes critical and conditional, loses its essence. Love that focuses on fixing isn't love at all. It's a reflection of a desire to control, to dictate terms, and to avoid the vulnerability of accepting someone as they are. The act of truly loving someone mirrors God's unconditional love for us. God accepts us in our imperfections and works with us gently through His Spirit, not through harsh criticism or force. When a relationship becomes about pointing out flaws or pushing for change, it strays from this divine example. 1 Corinthians 13:4-7 reminds us that love is patient and kind, that it always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. A loving relationship provides room for both partners to be themselves and invites growth naturally, not through pressure or criticism, but through encouragement and mutual respect. Relationships focused on change can leave both partners feeling unworthy or inadequate, fueling frustration rather than growth. True love encourages each person to flourish, accepting imperfections while trusting God to bring the necessary growth in His time. When the focus is on love and acceptance rather than on constant improvement, the relationship becomes a place of peace and support, embodying God's perfect love for us. If you found this message helpful and insightful, consider subscribing to our channel for more content that encourages and empowers you. Don't forget to like this video. Your support helps it reach more people who can benefit from these important lessons. Together, we can spread the word and create a community centered on love, acceptance, and personal growth. Thank you for watching.